Thank you, Chloe, for that very kind introduction, and welcome to everybody to FlowForma's webinar showcasing a fantastic case study of Sullivan Engineering and their digitization rollout and plan. There's lots to learn for everybody who's attending, and we're really excited to showcase it with you today. What I'd like to do is introduce ourselves. Gary, how are you today?
Good, thank you, Stuart, and hi everyone. Welcome.
Yeah,
all good.
Gary, would you just like to explain to the attendees who you are and what your role is in FlowForma, please?
Okay, so my name is Gary Mellows. I'm the head of delivery and customer success here at FlowForma. So one of my areas of responsibility is with onboarding new customers to FlowForma. So that really means getting them trained up, helping them, coaching them through building their first process and getting that live and getting them to a point of, I suppose, self-sufficiency in the quickest time possible, so they can go on and start to rapidly digitize additional processes after they've got their first primary process live.
Excellent. Now, Gary, you had experience of working with the Sullivan Engineering team. I don't want you to steal anything from what we're going to talk about in this webinar, but just briefly, what were they like to work with?
They were really, really good to work with. And what I mean with that is they made our job in terms of onboarding very easy. I mean, once they'd been through the training, within days, they were gone off building their own processes. And, you know, we had this one, I suppose, relatively complex process that we're focusing on as the primary process for the onboarding, but they were already off building additional processes, and they had lots of ideas and plans, and you could even tell by the types of questions they were back and asking how good a grasp they had on the tool and how far ahead they were thinking. So they were really, really good. I mean, we really quickly reverted back into an oversight role and a support role once they had the knowledge, the skills with the product. Where in other cases, there's a bit more holding this happen. But with Sullivan, they grasped it right away. And,
I think that came out strongly in the webinar. You know, I think they knew exactly what they were looking for from the start, and they had an excellent plan, which we'll talk about. Just to introduce myself, I'm Stewart Miller. I'm in a team of territory managers. So I speak to companies all over the world about their businesses, their objectives, their plans, what they're trying to achieve, and how processes are slowing them down. So this is pretty common in terms of when we look at the current state of organizations. This was a recent survey done by Forrester's and really looked at the large percentage of organizations, even with what's happened with COVID and all the news about digitization and the need for automation, there's still a very, very high percentage of organizations who are using manual processes, and we talk to them every day. Now, they're all different, so, you know, different organizations we find are trying to achieve different things. That could be increasing productivity, performance, ultimately reducing costs, or could be with a focus on improving customer and employee satisfaction. Or on the other side of things, it could be, you know, driving accuracy and quality and control to reduce business risks. And actually, with Sullivan, their objective was to achieve all of those. So it was an incredible journey that we supported them on and are continuing to support. How do you find in your role, Gary? Are you finding our customers are having a high degree of manual processes? You know, you mentioned you got Sullivan, pretty complex process running out with Sullivan. Do they then generally go on to digitize a lot more processes?
Yeah, in most cases, customers will, once they get their first few processes up and running, I suppose it starts to build momentum and create demand elsewhere in the business. They see the opportunity go. They might have bought it for a specific reason, but once the users come on board and start using the tool, then, you know, it's creating that demand, generate that demand from other areas that come in and start asking can you do this? Can you do this? Can you automate this? So I think it's all about getting started, building that initial momentum, and then it opens up a lot more opportunities across other areas of the business. It is quite surprising, and this would very much reflect what we see with our customers. Even the larger, more mature customers that have invested heavily in, big ERP, CRM systems that have some workflow capability, but it's quite limited and it's for specific areas of the business. And that's the beauty of, I suppose, where we come in. We can be used right across the business for not just customer-facing processes or, core financial processes, whatever it may be. It's for any process, HR, some of the lighter processes across the business. So that the flexibility and the adaptability of the tool, is a big differentiator for us. But it is surprising. It's definitely surprising the number of, we would consider, mature customers that still use a lot of manual processes across our business. Some areas that might be more mature than others, but they certainly all have still today using a lot of paper-based, manual, cumbersome processes that they should be automating. Yeah,
it's fantastic to see customers once they're empowered with using FlowForma. It's very easy to use, no code. It's absolutely fantastic to see what they go off and do themselves. They've got self-sufficiently, they're empowered to do it, and they can basically digitize processes. So Sullivan is not the exception. But
no,
it's just
absolutely not. We were talking to a customer earlier this week in the Middle East, actually, who, bought FlowForma for a specific set of processes just before the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit them, they went from something like 10 or so processes to 85 processes in 12 months.
Wow.
Within their business, within FlowForma. Themselves, to the point we didn't even know about it.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible. Look, so all the attendees today have come on to listen to Sullivan's journey. So, if we have a chat about that, we're having a spotlight on Sullivan Engineering.
Maybe I'll kick off with you, Stewart, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I can give my perspective, Gary, but please chip in as we go along. So for me,
so maybe just to set the scene for the case study, just tell us a little bit about Sullivan Engineering and their business.
Yeah, sure. Look, for me, it's a typical engineering business. They're very, very busy organization. They're heavily into compliance and regulation, and they're heavily into producing information in a very timely manner for their customers. In fact, their brand resides within that customer satisfaction of providing high quality, accurate information in a very timely manner. So the actual processes that sit underneath everything they do, and you can see some examples there: investigations, surveys, inspections, etc. All that is high activity, high data and information that's moving around the business, and they need to produce that accurate information to their customers in a very timely manner. If they don't, then the business suffers loss of customer satisfaction, and that affects their brand. So for me, there was they were working very, very hard to satisfy the customers, a very customer-centric business, but they were working very hard to actually generate the information and the reports that they needed to do. From your perspective, Gary, what was your thoughts on Sullivan Engineering as a business?
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly doing very well. The business is growing. They've an expanding team across multiple locations, which is made even harder with in the midst of the pandemic. Not unlike many other businesses, they were struggling with the rate of growth and the increase and the pressures on their own employees. Equally as being concerned about their customers and customer satisfaction, they're also concerned about the well-being and how they support them better and help them do their job, perform their job better. So yeah, I mean, really great customers to work with, and a great time, absolutely, with a burning need to start to automate some of these processes.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. So, Stewart, what motivated Sullivan Engineering to digitize, and what were the key things that indicated for them it was there was a time to change? So a lot of customers know they need to digitize, they need to do something, but quite often, something needs to trigger that. And what was that for Sullivan Engineering?
Yeah, the motivation for change and the motivation to digitize was really high within Sullivan. Historically, what they tried to do is use other process automation tools, and they hadn't been that successful with it. But the main driver, as I alluded to before, was client satisfaction. It was a high rate and traffic of information and that was going to and fro internally to generate reports for the customer. So, and they had a KPI turnaround of 2 days, which in a busy day-to-day operating environment was a real challenge to them. Efficiency and productivity had to be there, accuracy had to be there, and they felt that they wanted to empower the team so that they provided the solution themselves. So the motivation was high because the levels of pain were high, the previous pain was high, but it was a massive opportunity for improvement. What about you, Gary?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it there. They're clearly, it was unsustainable the way they were going. They tried this before. They had an existing tool in place. I think they found it quite cumbersome and very unreliable, and it was causing a lot of frustration across their employees and with their customers. And as you said, they had some challenging KPIs. Now, a KPI to deliver a report in 2 days, but that was quite a substantial report. So you had guys who would be out on site all day long, a long day, work with a customer on site, and then they're coming back to the office and spending hours at the end of the day, filling in these reports.
They were saying that the technology didn't help them. It wasn't reliable.
Exactly.
It wasn't end to end. So there was a high degree of frustration, not only within the operating staff, but in amongst the stakeholders as well.
But overall, I mean, they had a goal. That their goal was to become paperless, right? They're an expanding business, as I said earlier on. Their team was expanding across multiple locations. The system they had in place wasn't fit for purpose. Their processes, their manual, paper-based processes, were no longer fit for purpose. So they had to do something as the business was growing. That became, as I said, unsustainable.
Yeah, they couldn't scale, could they?
No.
Okay.
And they were also, it's fair to say, they were also concerned not just the cost of paper, but the impact on the environment. So they wanted to do something positive in that sense as well. You want to take this one, Stewart, or will I?
You have a start, Gary, and I'll chip in.
All right. So I think having gone through this experience internally with another tool, and as we mentioned earlier on, they found it very cumbersome and very unreliable, and it was causing a lot of frustration with their employees and customers. They were very clear on what they wanted. They clearly wanted something that was more reliable and easy to use, that helped them, and it wasn't an overhead. Helped them to do their job wasn't an overhead. These guys are really, really busy. The last thing they needed is, something they couldn't rely on and spent hours trying to, do their job with. It also had to be adaptable to processes right across the business, customer-facing processes, internal processes, not just the key reports or deliverables that they give to their customers. So it was something that they were going to be continue to drive adoption in other areas of the business and get increased value for their investment in FlowForma. That was key to them as well, and also something they could easily support. So they didn't have a reliance on third parties or deep technical skills or developer skills. They could easily support it themselves, and then equally, if they needed support on top of that the vendor our service provider could provide that, a good level, high level of support as well to them. So that was really key, because they've been through this before, as I said, and they wanted a different, more seamless experience for the users this time around. So having gone through it, they were clear on what they wanted.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've said there. One thing that was really, really strong was their plan from start to finish. They knew exactly what they wanted to achieve. They knew exactly what they wanted to do to deliver to the business. And they'd learned from their previous, say, strong as failures, but their previous attempts. Because of that, they knew exactly what kind of tool they wanted. And in FlowForma, they absolutely found an ideal fit for that. And they were able to, as you say, start rolling out processes. They consolidated to one place, so it was a consistent approach, and now they're reaping the benefits of it. So yeah, I think the big takeaway for me in terms of those requirements, they spent 3 months evaluating the market, but they knew exactly what they wanted, so they're able to rule in and rule out various solutions and providers, which was great.
Okay, so next question. Do you have any advice on how to get buy-in from stakeholders?
Yeah, basically because Sullivan had tried other solutions, they had lost a bit of faith and a bit of trust, not only with the people that were using the actual solution, but higher up in the organization. And there might have been some skepticism about, is this another tool? Is this one going to work, etc. So Sullivan set about that they really needed to prove reliability. They really needed to get that buy-in through that reliability and build in trust. So they identified processes that needed to work early and got the actual employees to use it. So they proved that it was working. They proved it was of value to the organizations, and those people using it actually bought into it and immediately got trust in using it. And also because of the experiences they had before, ensuring that whole process is rolled out seamlessly. Now, what Sullivan Engineering had the confidence of doing, because it's a matter of potentially minutes to change something in the flow, it's not as if you're going to change, having to do changes through coding by, going through change management into the IT department. The actual process owners could gain feedback from the people using the flow, and they could continuously improve and adapt the solution to exactly what was needed by the operators and users throughout the business. So, that adaptability, that level of flexibility, you don't actually have to release a process that's perfect in the first instance, because you've got the total confidence that you can change it to adapt to exact requirements as you go on. So there's an iterative continuous improvement theme. And they were very conscious that because of that previous experience and the lack of trust, and that any issues that came up, they immediately solved them. They were onto it, they were resolving it, and they worked predominantly, themselves, because FlowForma had empowered them to do so. But there was issues that they weren't quite sure of. They got a very speedy and agile support service from us. So there's some lessons to learn. There's some lessons to learn there. What about you, Gary?
Yeah, I think not just in the case with Sullivan, but just in general, adoption is key. Absolutely, you can have the best solution in the world, but if the users don't use it, they'll just revert back to the old ways, right? So you have to get them on board. And part of that is engaging them early, having them part of that process. Identifying some quick, high impact processes that will make a difference, a positive difference on your user, and acting on it and resolving it, because these are busy people, right? They've been through this before. There was a lot of frustration caused with the previous tool in the case of Sullivan. So having them part of the process, understanding the benefits of what you're trying to do, not just on them and the wider business, and then resolving any issues absolutely very quickly. So, it needs to be a seamless experience, as it says here. I think that applies to any solution with any business. There's a change component to it all, and you quite often get resistance to change. People are used to working a certain way, so getting the users engaged early, having them be part of the process, taking on board their feedback, acting on that feedback, and resolving issues quickly is key. Because if they don't adopt it, no matter what, it can be the Rolls Royce of solutions. It's of no value to your business, right?
Exactly, it's a critical area. But this is not an uncommon approach amongst our customers. Now, this next question is very much up your street, Gary, because obviously you and your team were involved in this. But can you tell us a little bit about the process Sullivan Engineering has digitized?
Yeah, I mean, the primary process they wanted to focus on for us was the field inspection report, which is a key deliverable for them in terms of what they do. It's quite a complex process. So it was a high impact process. So that was the one we focused on. But as we got in to start building that process with them on the back of coming off the training, we also wanted to get a quick win. We wanted to get something out there, get the users used to using the new solution, build some confidence. So obviously it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was around almost 12 months ago. And COVID was, global. Everyone was dealing with COVID. So there was a quick win in terms of we could build up the COVID checklist process, spin it up very, very quickly, test it and roll it out. So that's what we did. We got a process out there really early, got the users used to using the tool while we focused on the field inspection report.
Gotcha.
So we had a quick win and a high impact process. We kind of took that dual approach. And then following on from that, and very similar to the field inspection reports, is the leak investigation report. So they've done a lot of the grunt work in terms of for that. It's quite similar to the field inspection report. So that was an easier, although an equally complex process, it was made easier because it wasn't that dissimilar to the field inspection report. So these were the initial set of reports we worked on with Sullivan.
Okay, interesting. So we're going to go on and talk about, well, what actually did that mean to Sullivan Engineering? What effects did it have? You mentioned the impact, Gary, on their operations. So it'll be good to hear what actual benefits they delivered to Sullivan, and will continue to do it as they roll out and scale up.
Yeah, I mean, there was multiple benefits. Some of them are listed here. I mean, customer satisfaction, that was one of their key requirements. So, it really helped with their branding as well, actually. They had, they now had the same look and feel for the reports. They were able to meet the KPIs of 2 days turnaround. There was drive standardization, consistency of data. When you think you're filling in manual paperwork, you're trying to interpret people's handwriting, and then they skip some areas and they don't fill in everything, right? Most people filling in something when they're busy manually would do the bare minimum that's needed, and then someone has to interpret that and put it into a system somewhere. So that took all that work away. So they were much more efficient, more productive. I think they'd mentioned there were like 50% productivity increase they'd seen, improvement they'd seen.
Amazing.
The capture and accuracy of the data was, much higher. The team were much happier. So we're really empowering them to do their jobs better. And then it gave them a new way of thinking. So with the scope and the flexibility of a tool like FlowForma, they weren't limited to how they automated or how they built their processes. So I suppose it gave them, instead of thinking, it has to look like this and it has to work like this, it kind of opened their mind further in terms of the art of the possible, and they started thinking differently in terms of what do we need it to be, what should it be, because FlowForma could support it. So they couldn't really do that previously. There was too many restrictions and limitations. So it's changed the way of thinking of how they automate other processes. They don't think about what the tool can do. They think about what it needs to be, what the business needs, knowing the tool can support it. So
yeah,
that was
because of the flexibility and the adaptability. The big strategic one for me was born out of the client satisfaction, because the engineering business is all about brand reputation, it's all about accuracy, it's all about quality. And through the use of FlowForma, they were saying that the company is enhancing their branding through that client satisfaction. If you enhance your brand, you've got a happy customer. A happy customer will be happy to spend more monies with you, but they'll also be happy to talk to other organizations, just in general conversation and networking. Who would you recommend? Sullivan's Engineering has more chance of coming up, which will lead to extra revenue. And that 50% productivity that you mentioned, Gary, they're able to scale now, which they weren't able to before. So there are some significant strategic benefits in this, which is fantastic. So what takeaways have Sullivan Engineering seen since digitizing workflows? So this was their advice. So they knew, from our point of view, they knew exactly what they were looking to do right from the start. And as Gary says, they were a dream to work with. But think outside the box. The only limitation to process automation with FlowForma is how you think about processes, because the software can predominantly do anything that you want. But keep it simple. Perfection is the evil of good. So, and you've got this iterative, agile approach that you don't have to release a perfect process. You can release it into the business quickly, so you can actually reach time to value a lot quicker, and you can improve it through iterative changes over time. That's where they're saying, get a minimum viable product out there and tweak as you go. And they were confident in doing that. And also the initial takeaways was, do you have any internal challenges in terms of the people? Is there a cultural blocker in this? Who do we actually need to include? Who do we need to target? And Sullivan had all that mapped out. So actually the rollout, the adoption, because they had done it in a specific way, targeting various groups, went extremely well. Is there anything you can add to that, Gary?
No, I think you've covered it all. I think, get a process out there, get it out early. And the quickest way to get near perfection is by getting that feedback and tweaking and iterating it as you go along. I suppose the great thing about FlowForma is you can do that yourself. You don't need to come back to FlowForma or any other third party for help. Business users can do this. You don't have to go to IT. You don't have to go, bring in developer skills. It's that simple. Once they're enabled, they can tweak it as they go along, and this is all within their own hands. And I think that's really key, because they're more agile and more responsive to the feedback. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, in talking to Sullivan Engineering, what's next for them?
Well, as you can see here, based on following the success of the initial set of processes going live with that, they've another set of processes they're working on. These are really around the other key deliverables that they provide to their customers. But also, interestingly, we mentioned earlier, they're also looking at elsewhere in their business at their own internal processes and looking at what they could automate in FlowForma too. So that was the point. That was one of the requirements in terms of looking for another tool. Is it wasn't just it wasn't limited to a certain area of their business. It was adaptable and flexible, that they could cover all areas of their business. So they're also looking at that now, because they know how quick and easy it is to digitize those processes in FlowForma, and they're very capable of doing that themselves. So as you can see, they've plans to drive further adoption, both with customer-facing deliverables and also internally in their business, which is great. And exactly what we want to see from our customers.
They've set the foundation now, and they've empowered the business to scale and to automate where and when they want. So they're in a very good spot. So it's very exciting. Very exciting. Okay. So that sort of wraps up our discussion, Gary, about what our thoughts are on the Sullivan showcase. I hope our audience agrees that there's some significant takeaways in there that everybody can learn. You don't need to be in the engineering industry to follow this. This is relevant to everybody. What we'd like to do is just take a couple of minutes and no more, and just tell you a little bit more about FlowForma, if we may. So we're based in Dublin on the lovely island of Ireland, and we're an award-winning process automation provider. We're revolutionizing the BPM space through what makes us very, very different. And part of the reason why Sullivan delivered what they've been able to deliver is because they are using 100% no-code solutions. So you do not need coders. You do not need access to IT subject matter experts. And because of that, we have got global recognition from Forrester. We've won multiple awards, and the customer advocacy on G2 is just basically off the charts. Our customers love using the actual tool because it is making significant differences to their businesses. Now we're growing at a vast rate. As you can see, we've got in excess of 200,000 users, and we're all over the world. So whether you're based in North America, whether you're based in Asia, APAC, Middle East, Europe, wherever, we have customers in all continents. So where to start and who to be involved? Well, the first thing is don't be afraid of change, because if you don't change the results, that old adage. But you will need a champion. So who's going to be the champion who sells the whole proposition of the benefits of digital automation into the business? What we're talking about here, your ability to go quicker with more agility and more speed, is using the benefits of the FlowForma no-code tool. So you're not relying on IT subject matter experts who are busy, saying they can't do it. They're just extremely busy, and we'll start it down. Picking up on the advice from Sullivan is pick something obvious and launch it quickly, because you can change it. You can iteratively go on that continuous FlowForma. And as Gary says, focus on the adoption rates, get feedback, engage and adapt as you go through. And if you like, adopt the land and expand route, where you're actually getting multiple business people trained because you're empowering them. Those process owners own the problem of a manual process or an inefficient process. FlowForma empowers them to provide their own solution, and they can do it 5 times quicker than any alternative low-code solution on the market. But also, when you start, be aware of the outcomes. What are you actually looking to deliver to the business as an outcome? Sullivan were very clear about that, and they have realized 50% productivity, as Gary says. But also, you can look at your legacy systems, your proprietary systems. They'll have automation within them to a certain degree, but a number of our customers, what they do is they use FlowForma to automate any other remaining processes involved. Okay. Now, if you want to get involved with us, then reach out. We'll be very keen to spend some time with you. We're very keen to talk to you about what your objectives are as a business, what your process issues and challenges are. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to block? And there's various ways we can engage with you, but we'd like to talk to you first. And there's demonstrations and trials, etc., which we can expose the actual solution to you. And just to wrap up, this is just really just to supplement what Sullivan are delivering to their business. We have loads and loads of case studies. They're on our website, but there are some really significant and exciting things that our customers are delivering to their businesses. You can see examples here which are real, and our customers are actually doing this on a daily basis. Okay, so that brings us towards the end of the webinar. We've got a Q&A session now. So what we're going to do is handle those questions, if we may, at this point.
So how long does it take to digitize a process with FlowForma process automation?
Okay, you'd be probably better to answer this one, Gary, but I know the answer. So you know that it takes an average of around about 4 weeks. So once we have a defined process, the collaborative workshops that go on with Gary and his team, a couple of weeks we'll recommend, will get a process to production so that our customers are experiencing a very quick time to value of approximately 4 weeks.
Yeah, so that's really what our onboarding process, the target timeline for our onboarding process, and that includes training and enabling the customer as well in terms of getting them to a point of self-sufficiency, not just getting that process. So, a lot of it comes down to the customer's own availability as well. So we try to work on that type of timeline, but some customers go live within 2 weeks on a new process. Some of them may take 5 weeks, for example.
Okay.
But in terms of man hours, it's probably, depending on the complexity of the process, it's anything from a couple of hours to a couple of days to build a new flow.
Okay. Very quick, very quick. Gary, I don't have access to the questions, so I think, if you
I'll ask myself the next question.
That'll be
so
good.
What are the technical requirements for using FlowForma process automation? Really, very, very little. I mean, it's a SharePoint app, so you install FlowForma, which takes about 10 minutes into your SharePoint environment. You create a new site collection, you install FlowForma, you install our governance module, and it takes all of, as I said, 10 minutes to do that. Once it's up and running, it's installed, you can start building flows in it. So people are quite surprised with that, because for many other solutions, there's quite a lot of time that goes into the implementation of the solution. And even the configuration, even in SaaS solutions today. But for us, it's very quick. It's a SharePoint app. It's minimum time, minimum impacts from a technical perspective. Yeah.
What I find
it's your own Office 365 environment, so we don't have to do a lot to get it up and running.
Yeah, because of that, we get a lot of feedback from our customers, basically saying, the data security side of it is within a customer's own environment. So there's not so many concerns and questions asked if you're having to deal with a provider who hosts the actual software off-site. Therefore, your data is off-site. It doesn't go anywhere but within your own IT infrastructure. Have we got another question?
Yeah. Okay, I'll give this one to you, Stewart, if that's okay. So the third question that's come in is, I've got a lot of staff in remote areas. Would the FlowForma tool work for remote users?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there is a mobile, the solution is mobile responsive. So what that means is that any of the flows, any of the screens actually render to what mobile device you're using, whether that's Android, iOS, iPad, desktop, whatever it is. So anybody on the move, anybody outside of an office, anytime, any place can actually get into the process and use it. And also there's an offline capability. So we originally built it for our construction users that were offline. They might be underground or whatever, but they didn't have access to the internet. So there's an offline capability that you can actually continue using the process, and as soon as you come back online, it will kick in and do that. So you're not hindered in any way about where you are in the world or what you're doing or any time of the day or night. And it's simply that you have a browser access and you'll be able to use the flow.
Yeah, okay. So next question, I'll take this one, Stewart. Our processes often need changes. Could I make these changes in-house with the FlowForma tool? And I think we mentioned this earlier on, was one of the real key benefits for Sullivan, and being responsive to any feedback they got or any issues they got from the users. They didn't rely on anyone else, so they were able to be really, really responsive. So once you're up to speed and you've gone through the training, you're pretty much self-sufficient. You're not relying on anyone else. You can quickly make changes and roll out those changes across your organization without any reliance on any other third party or any developer skills or deep technical skills, which means you're much more agile and responsive to your customers and your users.
That's it. And you can see our tagline of our logo, it's about empowering process automation, empowering business process owners to digitize and make impact in their business themselves. So very good question.
So the last final question, Stuart, I have here is, could I enable my suppliers to input to processes digitize the FlowForma tool?
Oh, another great question. Yeah, look, 100%. So we have the ability to involve third-party organizations in a seamless end-to-end flow. So who I'm talking about there, I'm talking about customers, talking about contractors, subcontractors. It could be even an applicant, coming in from an HR recruitment process. So if you do have any external organizations that you can't involve in a process, you can with FlowForma, and that can be a two-way dialogue. So very, very useful for our customers in looking at all of their opportunities within their business. And it's an opportunity to really improve that customer satisfaction aspect of it, because the customer's enjoying an online experience that's very easy and intuitive to use. So 100% we can do that.
Yeah, we can do that, anonymously and securely.
Yes.
With any type of user outside your organization, whether it be a partner, contractors, as you said, registrants applying for something, or engaged by. I suppose that's a really big differentiator for us, and something we're seeing a huge demand for in recent years across our customer base. Yeah.
Excellent. I think you mentioned that was the last question, Gary.
It was. That's okay. It.
So look, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the last few minutes listening to the journey and the experiences of Sullivan, and a bit of experience added from Gary and ourselves. Thanks for joining. We would love to talk to you directly. Please get in touch with us, and you can register for a 14-day FlowForma trial if you go on our website, www.flowforma.com. We'd initially love to talk to you, but we'll hand back to Chloe. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.